Tsunami Race Against Time is a new four-part National Geographic series about the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. We're getting never-before-seen footage and personal accounts from survivors, journalists, rescuers, and scientists. Filmmakers Daniel Bogado and James Parris here to chat all about their new project. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
David, let's go ahead and start with you. Especially with so much going on in the world right now with climate. Take us back to 2004. How many lives were lost? Tell us a little bit about the scene and how people were preparing for this tsunami.
Yeah, well, it's 20 years ago, which is sometimes difficult to believe that so much time has passed. And then you think about 20 years ago, and it was such a different world. There weren't mobile phones everywhere. And it was such a big disaster. It's one of the worst natural disasters in human history. Nearly 250,000 people died in one single day. So we felt we had a very big responsibility to basically try to find as much archive as we could to tell the story of that day.
James, let's talk a little bit. How did this project start? Was it personal accounts from the survivors, the scientists, journalists? What was kind of that catalyst for this project?
Well, I think the catalyst for the project was actually a different project. Danny made a series a few years ago called 9/11, One Day in America, about the September the 11th attacks on New York. And that really provided the model and the inspiration for our approach to this particular subject. But as you say, it's survivors' stories that really inspired us, and survivors' stories that we pursued from the very beginning. But we were out to find as many people who hadn't voiced their stories before, find them, track down the archive that we could use to tell their stories. And that really forms the emotional core of this series.
Take us through some of the emotions, because as you're watching it, you still hear the shakiness in people's voices. You still see that raw emotion. It does not feel like 20 years ago. It feels like you're asking somebody about something that happened yesterday. Talk a little bit about connecting, especially with those survivors.
It's 20 years ago for us, but it's every single day for many of them. This is the worst day of their lives. And we feel a particular responsibility as filmmakers that we're asking them to tell really strangers about the very worst day of their lives. They live not only with the memories of what happened to them, but in many cases, the memories of what happened to very close loved ones, people that they met on holiday or their work colleagues, tapping into that level of grief, but also being with people while they process that and work through it in telling their story is a really important part of what we do. And I hope it comes across in the final series.
I think it absolutely does. I mean, Daniel, let's talk a little bit about, the humanity in this. I mean, oftentimes you see just the headline of a story of something bad that happens or a natural disaster. And, you kind of think of, what keeps a lasting impact. And I know, for me, I remember one of Oprah's guests that she had on the show. Oprah's talk show was a very popular show at the time. Nate Berkus lost his partner, Fernando, in the tsunami. They were in Sri Lanka at the time. And he went on the show and gave a firsthand account. And I think when people could relate to not just seeing a number, but personal stories, to this day, 20 years later, that interview still haunts me. And I can still remember his emotions and his facial expressions.
Yeah, basically what we did is we tried to find these people who had incredibly astonishing stories, but often these were things that were filmed, so you can see them in the video archive. And what we do is we follow it minute by minute. And so you're following the whole emotional journey with them. Sometimes they're separated from their loved ones, and the film follows whether they'll be reunited or not. So it's an incredibly powerful experience to just share with them their journey of that day.
Let's talk a little bit about the act of heroism, the act of selflessness that we saw, on that day. And that's an important part of the series, as well, too. People obviously looking out for their homes and for their families, but really helping each other in this time of crisis and this time of need. Talk a little bit about that spirit that we're going to see in the series.
I think sorry, James.
Go ahead.
Well, I think it's something amazing that you can see in every, I did, as James says, a series of 9/11, and you could see it there as well. When we're in trouble, when there's a big, horrible event, there's just a human need, a human drive to help. Everybody just really wants to help. And what's amazing about this series is that you could see it in all these countries that we went to. Everybody had the same story to tell. Everybody was just so touched and so moved. Like people in Thailand, there were tourists there, and they could see other Thai people who had lost themselves everything, who had all their belongings swept away, and still their first thing that they wanted to do was to help other people, even if they didn't have much. So all those stories are incredibly inspirational, and I really think it's the heart of the series.
James, you also wanted to chime in. What did you have to say about this?
Oh, my thing is, I think we all ask ourselves what we would do in our lives if faced by something like that, and 99.9% of us, thankfully, never have to. Almost every single person that we met over the last 2 years has had to face that choice, and in almost every case, they did the thing that we all hope we would do, which is to help others before themselves. So it's incredibly inspiring. It was a pleasure to meet all of them.
Daniel, let's talk a little bit about what the area looks like now. How have things changed within the Indian Ocean, within some of the way they build houses, the communities, how they prepare, the impact 20 years later from the tsunami?
Yeah, well, things have changed quite dramatically because the one of the key parts of this story is that there wasn't an expectation that there would be a tsunami in the Indian Ocean. Tsunamis often happen in the Pacific Ocean, and that's why there was a warning center there. So that area got completely destroyed because there were no warning centers, so there was no way to warn people. So since then, I think we've learned the lesson, and even when we were traveling there, we could see the warning centers, we could see signs to the bridges. So if it happens again, these populations are much more prepared. Not only there, all the major ocean basins now have a tsunami warning center. So that's great but we're responding to that tragedy. I think the lesson is that we shouldn't wait for a tragedy to happen. We actually should be proactive about looking at disasters that may be coming our way and reacting to them before they happen, not after.
Let's talk a little bit about the journalists, the rescuers, the scientists. What is kind of their big emotion, what haunts them, what is, kind of top of their mind, because obviously, journalists and, and scientists work on a lot of projects all the time, but there's those big ones that stick out in your mind and, you can recall it in a moment. I mean, talk a little bit about the lasting impact of this for them.
Well, I think for the seismologists and scientists involved, this is one of the darkest as well as one of the largest days of their careers. They were in an almost impossible situation, which is that they were trying to literally get ahead of the wave, despite very, very little access to the data at the time in 2004 that they needed in order to get the message out there. There wasn't a tsunami warning system in place in the Indian Ocean. That meant they were always behind the curve. And essentially, they were discovering the damage when it was too late to do anything about it. And I know that lives with every single one of them.
Well, thank you both so much for your time today. Tsunami Race Against Time, now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.